Elon Musk isn't just obsessed with the UK, but the whole of Europe. And after 9 days of spreading misinformation here about grooming gangs and Tommy Robinson, he's turned his attention to Germany. And there are no prizes for guessing who he's allied with there. Yes, Elon is a big fan of the far-right Alternative for Deutschland, or AfD. And on Thursday this week, he hosted their leader on an X live feed. Now, the AfD is a very extreme party. In January last year, it was revealed that senior party leaders had met with neo-Nazi influencers to discuss the mass deportation of people with immigrant backgrounds, even if they had residency rights or citizenship. And the scandal showed them to be so extreme that even Marine Le Pen distanced herself from the party. So they were too extreme for the national rally in France. She's saying, well, actually, even this is a bit too much for me. And senior AfD figures have also been fined for using Nazi slogans, which is illegal in Germany. Bjorn Höcke, who is a co-founder of the party and its leader in Thuringia, was fined for encouraging an audience to chant "Everything for Germany," which is an SS slogan. But in Thursday's conversation with Elon Musk, current party leader Alice Weidel went to great lengths to try and rewrite the nature of Germany's Nazi past.
Back then, during the Third Reich, the National Socialists, as the word says, they were socialists.
Yeah, very much so. They nationalized industries like crazy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. He was a communist, and he considered himself as a socialist. So what they did, they state funded then the private companies, and then they asked for taxes, huge taxes, and then also wait a second, I need to ask the word now, verstaatlichen.
Nationalize.
Yeah, nationalize the entire industry. You said that before, and the biggest success after that terrible era in our history was to label Adolf Hitler as right and conservative. He was exactly the opposite. He wasn't a conservative. He wasn't a libertarian. He was a communist, socialist guy. Yeah. So full stop, no more comment on that.
Now, Aaron, later in this segment, I'm going to look at sort of a variety of reasons why Elon Musk might be allying with the AfD. I thought I'd go to you first, though, just to respond to that claim that actually Hitler was communism's problem. He was a communist.
What a stupid comment to make. A stupid person. What a ridiculous, idiotic series of words we just subjected our audience and viewers to, Michael. Where to begin? I mean, the AfD are very, very bad people. They're bad news. And you mentioned the Le Pen point, and that's a really, really critical one. The AfD are actually in their own grouping in the European Parliament. They are not with the likes of Le Pen. They are with a Bulgarian ultra-nationalist party. They are with the party of Eric Zemmour, Reconquête. So they are too far right for Fidesz and for the most right-wing ultra-nationalist parties in Europe. They are further to the right of those guys. They're very, very right-wing. You know, Musk has this line, doesn't he? He says, well, I like this person. You know, Trump is like Obama in 2008. Presumably the AfD, they're no different to Obama in 2008. But the debates move so far to the left now, you know, AfD are like Obama with hope and change. And, 16 years ago, they would have been pals. I don't think so. So that's the point about AfD and their political background and complexion. In terms of whether or not Hitler was a communist, Dachau, which is the very first concentration camp. By the way, this borders. We're getting now, I think, quite close to genocide denial. Right? If you start to say, well, actually, Hitler was left-wing. Dachau, the very first concentration camp, was built for political prisoners who were, guess what, left-wing. National Socialists, the NSDAP. It's in the name. Well, then presumably you think that the Democratic Republic of Congo under Kabila, well, they were democratic. It said it in the name. What a stupid way of thinking. Just ridiculous. That first concentration camp, Dachau, like I say, opened in 1933 for political prisoners, included many people from the criminalized, the banned Communist Party. Eventually, it would include many trade unionists. Of course, the Nazi Party didn't permit trade unions. So I don't quite understand where you get the idea that they're left wing. But Hitler, time after time in Mein Kampf, talks about the enemy being Marxism, Judeo-Bolshevism, how the forces of the Marxist left are destroying the nation. For Hitler, the idea of class and race were intertwined. He viewed, for instance, that he viewed the state as the expression of racial solidarity amongst ethnic Germans. That in no way is coterminous with ideas about socialism. They were trying to generate a unique, sui generis political movement. And of course, Germany before the emergence of Nazism had an incredibly successful left-wing political history. The SDP, which still exists today, one of the parties in the German government, is one of the oldest left-wing parties in Europe. In fact, I believe Friedrich Engels helped to set it up. Goodness knows what he'd make of Olaf Scholz. But they had a very storied history influencing, the debate with regards to Bismarck and so on. Bismarck gives all kinds of concessions, effectively a protean welfare state in the newly reunified Germany, because they're worried about the uptick in political success that's coming from the SDP. You, of course, get later on the KPD, the actual Communist Party. Very, very powerful movements. And so Hitler and his faction within the Nazi Party, and there was a debate about all of this stuff, make the decision to appropriate the language, but to really hammer even the left within their own political party. Forget the socialists and the communists out there. When you get the Enabling Act, the Communist Party isn't there, like I say. This is before actually they're prohibited. Many of them are on the run. Many of them subsequently end up in prison. So this idea that they're communists and socialists is just so idiotic that, like I say, it borders on a form of historical denialism, which I think is deeply disingenuous. Like I say, these were the very first people in concentration camps in 1933. After 1935, you start to get people from other groups, but between 1933 and 1935, almost entirely the people in Dachau would have been on the left, trade union activists. Disgusting, frankly.
I mean, it is disgusting. I mean, to use such a crass argument as, that they were called the National Socialists, so they're socialists. I mean, you went to the Democratic Republic of Congo. Of course, you could also talk about the GDR, the German Democratic Republic. You should ask, or Elon Musk, if he was a little bit smarter, could have asked the lady from the AfD, which was the democratic one, West Germany or East Germany, because West Germany was the Federal German Republic, or the Federal Republic of Germany, and then East Germany was the German Democratic Republic. Which one was democratic? In Korea, South Korea is the Republic of Korea. North Korea is the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. So again, you can ask the AfD, which one is democratic of those two? We could talk about this for a while. I do want to move on to a slightly different issue, though, which is why Elon Musk is focusing so much energy on Europe. Obviously, been tweeting 40 times a day about Britain, now getting really, really close to the AfD and backing them in public. Now, the most obvious explanation, really, is that he's boosting the far right in Europe because he is genuinely very, very far right. This is an ideological thing. So from Elon Musk's Twitter, it's pretty clear that he's a white nationalist, right? He grew up in apartheid South Africa, so that also checks out. That makes sense how he might have come to this position. And if your aim is to defend so-called white civilization, which is what all of these right-wingers on Twitter like to talk about, it's obvious why agitation against immigration in Europe might become your obsession, right? You want to keep Europe white. It's the home of white people. Is this why Elon Musk is so obsessed? Just because he's an out-and-out racist, basically. Now, I think this is clearly a big part of why Musk does what he does. I don't think he's pretending to be a white supremacist. I think he is one. But there is also a potential business case as to why Elon Musk wants to bring down centrist European governments. Namely, the Europeans are hoping to compete with his satellite network. So it's called Starlink, and Bloomberg reported in December that the European Union is committed to build an $11 billion constellation of satellites that will provide the bloc with encrypted global internet connectivity. And they report this. The EU is concerned about becoming dependent on a private service after militaries across the world showed interest in Starlink's applications. The plan, which will be carried out through a public-private partnership, aims for IRIS-2 to be a European-operated alternative to third-party actors. So Starlink, run by SpaceX, owned by Elon Musk. The EU want to build a competitor. The article is clear that Elon Musk doesn't have to worry too much in the short term because the EU project will have a difficult time catching up with Starlink. So Musk currently controls 6,000 satellites. The EU project is hoping to have 290 by 2030, although they might be a little bit further out into space, apparently. The project, though, can be viewed as a bit of a statement of intent. So the CEO of one of the companies working on the EU-backed project told Bloomberg this: "There is this narrative in the industry that Starlink has won and everyone else is dead, right? That's not true. They invest a lot of money, so they are very difficult to compete with. However, every country and every nation wants to have sovereignty and independence. Even small countries are looking to launch a satellite." Now, the reason the Europeans seem very concerned about this is because the strategic importance of Starlink satellites became very apparent to them after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So you might remember at the start of the war, Elon Musk was helping the Ukrainians. That was by providing their army with access to internet satellite or to his internet satellite network. But then Musk angered Ukrainians when SpaceX limited access to Starlink for use for Ukrainian drones. So he said, you can use the internet for this, but not that. Now, regardless of your views on the rightness or the wrongness of that decision, so I think it concerned drones in Crimea. Now, you might think that, you might have different opinions on whether it's a good idea for Ukraine to be using military drones in Crimea, but that's not really the issue here. The issue is the amount of power that this gives to one private man, one private individual who owns this company, who can basically make massive geopolitical decisions. And that's something about which former German Chancellor Angela Merkel has publicly expressed concern about. So in November last year, she was promoting her book, and she said this to Der Spiegel magazine. So she said, "There is now a visible alliance between Trump," she's talking about, "with the big companies from Silicon Valley, which have enormous power through capital. If a person like Musk is the owner of 60% of all satellites orbiting in space, then that must be a huge concern for us. Along with the political issues, politics must determine the social balance between the powerful and ordinary citizens." And she says, "During the 2008 financial crisis, the political sphere was the final authority that could straighten things out. And if this final authority is too strongly influenced by companies, whether through capital power or technological capabilities, then this is an unprecedented challenge for us all." And so she's really worried about one individual having this much power. And of course, Merkel, she was German Chancellor for 16 years. She's pretty much the embodiment of the European centrist establishment. And so you can see why Musk might prefer a more right-wing alternative, right? Why he might prefer the AfD to having the Social Democrats or the Christian Democrats in power in Germany, which is, of course, the most powerful country in Europe. So far, at least as well, and this is significant, where the far right are in power in Europe, they have already been very helpful to Elon Musk. We know this because just as the EU announced it was trying to build an alternative to SpaceX and Starlink, Italy, which is of course run by Giorgia Meloni, has signed a $1.6 billion deal with SpaceX. Right? The news broke the day after Meloni met with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. Aaron, what's your read on this situation? So I think, clearly, as I say, I think the ideology matters here, but it is also the case that in sort of Elon Musk's plan for world domination, as it seems, sort of the centrist European establishment could be a bit of a barrier to him getting absolutely everything he wants.
I think that's right. I think also people forget that the European Union plus the UK, Europe as a whole, is a huge market. It's 500 million people. The US, I think, is about 350 million. If you look at GDP by PPP, so you're adjusting for the value of the domestic currency, the economy of the EU, is broadly the same as the economy by GDP of the US. So it's a huge market. People like to talk about decline and it not doing very well, or true. Europe isn't producing particularly large technology companies. Spotify is one exception. SAP in Germany is another. But in California alone, you have $4 trillion plus companies. Europe is not producing those companies, but it's still a very large, wealthy market. And I think the likes of Musk, but also Zuckerberg, Bezos, look at it as critical. What really stood out for me, actually, Michael, this week was when Mark Zuckerberg announced that volte-face with regards to Trump. And he was saying, we will work alongside the presidency to ensure that, the Europeans don't get away with that. Anti-innovation measures basically means don't you dare apply tariffs or regulation which might undermine our business model. So all of a sudden, despite Elon Musk being viewed as something of the outside, of the bad guy in Silicon Valley, it's clear that that's changing. And I suspect people like Musk, Zuckerberg rather, Bezos, Larry Ellison, they start to think, well, Europe, there's lots of money that can be made. Larry Ellison's thinking, well, look, if we can digitize their health records, the AI applications that come out of that, Oracle's going to make a hell of a lot of money. Jeff Bezos is looking at Amazon, not just with regards to its warehousing, but also with regards to its web services. Meta has 101 products there. Well, we want nice regulations and a nice regulatory environment for self-driving cars and Waymo. So all of a sudden, you have 4, 5, 6, 7 companies in the US. Forget who the president is. Right now, they align. That's the dangerous thing. But you have 4, 5, 6 companies in the US who actually look at Europe really as not a sovereign place. It doesn't have technological sovereignty, that's for sure. But they're basically thinking, oh, maybe it shouldn't have political and economic sovereignty either. That is really worrying. And I don't think enough Europeans understand how bad this is. This hasn't just started. It's quite amusing. You've got the Europeans now saying, well, we should have our own satellites. By the way, I wrote a piece in 2019 saying that we should, it was in the Versailles blog, saying that we should have a space-based 5G internet. That should be a project for socialists, that a France led by Mélenchon and a Britain led by Corbyn, they could pay for it. The numbers involved aren't that big when you actually look at the value added. I published that in 2019. People were laughing at me. Because they were saying, this is ridiculous, space-based internet. We need to think as big as the oligarchs. We need to think as big as the capitalists. If people on the European left are incapable of thinking as big as the corporate 1% in the United States, we're finished. We're over. We're done. We will have an eternal transfer of wealth and value across the Atlantic every day, week, month, year for the rest of my life. So we have a duty to think big, not just for ourselves, but also for our children, our children's children. We have to. So, the Europeans are late to the game. I'm happy they're there saying this kind of stuff. But actually, this goes far beyond, satellites, Michael. We're talking right now on YouTube. People are watching. Great. Alphabet, US company. On the way here, I used contactless on the tube. Guess what I used? Apple Pay. If I didn't use Apple Pay, it would have been Visa. If it wasn't Visa, it would have been MasterCard. Every single one of those transactions sees a tiny amount of money go across the Atlantic. By the way, that's an argument for a publicly owned payment system. Again, if you said that 5 years ago, stupid left winger. What? It's smart, it's prudent to have loads of money just constantly going over to the US? Is that what we want to do? Again, walk down a high street, every new business, it's a cutesy little cafe or whatever, it's probably being funded by private equity. And if you look at the people involved, actually many of those people are US based. Or if you look at Labour's own growth strategy and how to build infrastructure, they're talking about people like BlackRock being at the center of it. US-centric wealth management, private equity, with their open-ended asset funds, in the case of BlackRock asset managers. That apparently is the path in this country to prosperity and success. No, it is about Europe falling deeper and deeper and deeper into technological, economic, political, social, cultural subservience and subordination to the United States. It doesn't have to be like that, by the way. It doesn't have to be like that. I don't mean to wax lyrical, but this is the continent that gave the world Da Vinci, Darwin, Newton, Pascal, Pasteur. We could go on and on. Galileo, Aristotle. The idea that, we can't do anything because we're so fucking useless. We need some $1 trillion companies in California to do it for us. What a pathetic place to be in. And I'll also finish on this, Michael. There is an alternative that's not just about Europe, right? If we're talking about being this clientelist dependency on somewhere else, hey, there's also China. There was a Ben Shapiro tweet a few days ago sort of saying, the Atlantic is this anti-European moat. We're going to colonize Canada. We're going to take Greenland. Why do Europeans have to take this shit? What are we getting out of this deal? You tell me what we're getting out of this deal. If the alternative is, actually, you normalize relations with Venezuela, cheap oil. You normalize relations with Iran, cheap gas. You normalize relations with China, cheap electric vehicles, functional 5G, high-speed rail. No, I don't think we should just completely, allow all that stuff here. We want our own domestic industries in Europe, of course, too. But if those are the options, dependency on the US or China, I mean, actually, there's probably a bit more to it than just, picking that one. If they're just going to basically parasitize our economies more and more every year for the rest of our lives. Michael, it sounds like quite a bad deal. That's why people like Elon Musk now are looking at these clientelistic relationships with European leaders on the radical right. And I think, yeah, it's partly ideological, but he's also seeing a political opportunity. And it's a real one, right? We could see the AfD come into government in February, if not then, in 2029. Geert Wilders, his party is the largest party in the Netherlands. He's not the prime minister. Their polling is higher now than it was in the last election. You've obviously got Maloney, Vox are on the rise in Spain, Reform in UK. You could go on and on and on and on. And this is a business opportunity for the likes of Musk. I really believe that. They may believe the stuff they're saying as well, but first and foremost, it's about dollar signs coming in their eyes like Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah, I mean, you've highlighted sort of the dependent relationship of Europe on the United States and how that leaves us vulnerable to a situation such as this. The thing I was thinking about, especially with this, was sort of the vulnerability of also the United States to this individual Elon Musk, right? And this is one situation where I think the Democratic Party in some way snookered itself, because one of the reasons why to be honest, the main reason why Elon Musk controls 60% of the satellites in space is because Obama, when he was president, opened up space travel to private industries by signing billion-dollar contracts with SpaceX. So instead of NASA sort of doing the next generation of rockets and the next generation of satellites, they decided to pay SpaceX to do it for them. And in the short term, that might have made space travel cheaper than it otherwise would have been, right? It does seem like SpaceX has been a remarkably productive company. But over the longer term, it means that you've given this one individual so much control over, geopolitics, could be geoengineering, could be all sorts of things, where this one guy owns 60% of the satellites. And now that might have been a situation that Obama could tolerate when back then Elon Musk was a Democrat who was giving money to the Obama campaign, or at least, the Obama presidential campaign. I'm not sure who he sort of was for in the primaries. But then this very volatile individual, when he switches to Donald Trump and starts to use all of his powerful infrastructure against the liberal establishment, then, oh, fuck, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Right? Maybe we shouldn't have made so much critical infrastructure reliant on the whim of this one unstable individual, which is what we've done. I do find this very scary that this guy is now in the White House, richest man in the world, controls 60% of satellites, is actively trying to intervene in European politics. And it was in the Financial Times and a bunch of newspapers, wasn't it, that he's told people he wants to bring down Keir Starmer, right? This is a very dangerous situation, I think.